All right, good afternoon, everybody. Hope all is well. Hope everybody had a great spring break and you're ready for this final run to the finish line. Oh, trying to get everybody in. All right, good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. Okay, I think everybody who, well, only half the class is here, but we're going to wait on them. But while we wait on them, if you would go into Canvas, we're going to start Unit 5. I think there are still a couple of people I still have to finish grading their Unit 4 tests. Might be a couple of people who still need to take the test. But while we're waiting for them, if you would look over 5.1, Tragedy of the Commons. Um, we don't have time to do it. Something I do with my general environmental science classes. We looked at, and then a couple of you were in my environmental science class, we looked at the Lorax. And the Lorax is a movie that they always reference with Tragedy of the Commons, in that it is a perfect example of someone doing what they want to do without considering the well-being of the rest of the world and how that ended up. So if you're a Dr. Seuss person and you like the Lorax, think about the Lorax when you think about this topic of Tragedy of the Commons. I had a whole worksheet and everything that went with that video. But we're not going to do that because y'all are AP class and we're trying to get everything done, get all your topics done before the end of the semester, before next month, when, for those of you who are um, taking the exam. They do have some updates, so please be checking your emails. Those of you who signed up for updates on the AP exam, some things that you can do and you can't do. Right now, they're making sure that the folks who are doing milestone testing in 2 weeks, they're checking their Chromebooks, but that's going to be something that you will need to do as well, to make sure that your Chromebook is functional, that all your keys are working, all your features are working, calculators and things of that nature, so that because you do have to do it on your Chromebook and you do have to go to the center to take the test. So you want to make sure that if you need to swap it out with the office, that's something that you need to let them know about now. Okay. All right. We still got quite a few people who are missing, but I'm going to go ahead and get started because that means they're very late. All right. So as always, I have Mr. Sneed's handy. Actually, I'm going to stop sharing for 1 minute and I'll be right back. But you could look at that and that'll give those latecomers a few more minutes to get in. Here's one. All right, good afternoon. We're in Canvas right now looking at 5.1. So if you could log into Canvas and look at that. Okay. Where am I? Okay, there we go. 5.1. Okay, thank you. All right, we are taping, so she will be able to know what it is we're doing today. All right, so we are doing 5.1, and we're going to get you the introduction to that topic. And then I will let you work in the AP classroom. Come on. There we go.
Hey everybody, it's Mr. Smeeds, and today we'll be starting off Unit 5 by covering topic 5.1, which is the tragedy of the commons. So the tragedy of the commons is this idea that people tend to overuse public or shared resources since they don't experience the negative consequences of doing so. It can help us understand issues as complex as air and water pollution, and as simple as why public restrooms are so dirty. Our objective for the day is to be able to explain the concept of the tragedy of the commons. And the essential knowledge that we need in order to do this is to know that the tragedy of the commons suggests individuals tend to use public or shared resources in their own self-interest, which will deplete these resources. Our suggested science skill for the day is concept explanation. So first we'll define what the tragedy of the commons is. The phrase was originally coined by a British economist, William Foster Lloyd, who used the overgrazing of animals on shared public lands as an example of when individuals act in their own self-interest rather than the interest of the greater good. But it didn't become part of mainstream environmentalist theory until 1968, when an American ecologist named Garrett Hardin wrote an essay with the title, The Tragedy of the Commons.
Yeah, you got it.
That was a quick commercial.
Which drew heavily from Lloyd's work. The basic idea is that individuals tend to overuse shared resources in their own self-interest, which will deplete these resources. Now, there's two really important key points here. They have to be public resources, not private ones, because then the users would experience the negative consequences of their overuse. And the second one is that the resource has to be depleted by this overuse. So it can't be something that's not affected by overuse. So we'll take a look at some examples now. The classic example is overgrazing, and that's having too many animals on one patch of land, as we can see sheep here in the picture. Then there's overfishing, which is another classic example. So people catching so many fish that we deplete fish populations and leave none for future generations. Water and air pollution of all sorts are another great example. And then finally, we have overuse of groundwater, which we'll look at a little more in depth with a specific Michigan example. So why does the tragedy of the commons happen? Well, the biggest reason is that when no one owns a resource, no one directly suffers the negative consequences of depleting or overusing that resource. The same idea that applies to public restrooms applies to public resources. So if you've ever been in a public restroom, they're oftentimes quite dirty. There's a lot of paper towel left on the floor or water splashed all over the mirror. And this is because no one directly feels responsible for keeping it clean. So the people that use it don't have to suffer the consequences of it becoming dirty because they get to just leave and go home. On the other hand, if they owned that restroom, if it was in their own house, they'd probably treat it a lot differently. They'd probably keep it a lot cleaner. For a Michigan example, we have a private company, Nestle, who recently submitted a request to increase the rate of pumping water from a well in Everett, Michigan, from 250 to 400 gallons a minute. This is because the groundwater that they're pumping is a public shared resource. So they're not going to suffer the negative consequences of overusing it. If they overuse this groundwater source and deplete it, and it's not available for future use, they can just move and find another site to pump groundwater. They aren't stuck living there with the consequences of having depleted that groundwater. Another cause for the tragedy of the commons is this idea that if I don't overuse the resource, someone else will. So we have a great comic here to illustrate that. We have the fisherman on the left saying, well, there it is, the last fish in the ocean. And he seems kind of concerned about this. And the guy on the right has got a big grin. He says, woohoo, at least we beat the Russians and the Spaniards to it. So that's just kind of illustrates this idea that people assume if I don't overuse the resource, someone else will. So why not profit from what's left of it? And then finally, there are just oftentimes no real direct consequences for overusing or depleting a resource. We see this especially in developing nations like Peru here, where there's hazardous medical waste just being dumped into a river. So without laws that will threaten to sue or impose harsh fines on people that do this, there's less of an incentive to care for those publicly shared resources. So what's the problem with the tragedy of the commons? Why is this really such a big issue? Well, the first issue is that things like overfishing can lead to total depletion of resources. So we have this case of the Atlantic cod here, which was overfished severely in the late 60s and in the 70s. And then we see this huge population crash. And so fishermen are going to lose their income. And in parts of the world where people really rely on fish for food, there may even be starvation. Another great example is air pollution. So air pollution comes from driving our cars. It comes especially from coal-fired power plants to produce the electricity we demand. And so this is going to put things like sulfur dioxide into the air, and it's going to be really harmful to people's lungs. It damages their respiratory tract. It can make asthma and bronchitis worse. And over the long run, there's going to be increased healthcare costs for these people who are suffering from these respiratory issues. Another great example is pesticide use. So farmers put pesticides on their crops to increase their yield, increase the amount of food they produce and their profits. But these pesticides are washed away in the rain. They can get into local rivers and streams or even trickle down to the groundwater. And that can contaminate groundwater sources that people use for drinking. It can damage fish populations in the streams that people rely on for recreation and for income. And so all of these are what we call negative externalities. So negative externality is a cost that comes with a human activity, but that isn't experienced by the person that's doing that activity. So the coal-fired power plants that are producing a lot of sulfur dioxide, they don't experience the negative healthcare costs of the people who have worsened asthma or bronchitis. Or the farmer who sprays pesticides on their crops, they don't experience the negative recreational dollars that are lost from downstream communities whose fish populations suffer. And so we can see that these negative externalities are basically passed on to a different person somewhere else. And that's what we call an externality, because the cost is externalized. Think of it kind of as like an unintended consequence. So how do
University of Phoenix is built for real life. At some schools, to save money, you have to
I
move
love him,
fast
but
and
he
load up
has
on
so many
courses.
commercials.
We keep it
But somebody
simple.
got to pay the
Take
bills.
one course at a time with fixed, affordable tuition. Get started at phoenix.edu.
I think it's completely fine to be inspired by your gear. That changes the way you see and gets you back.
So how do we solve the tragedy of the commons? Well, the first concept is to make these publicly shared resources private, either by selling them to individuals or by having government ownership so that someone is responsible for maintaining them and they don't fall victim to the tragedy of the commons. Another way to do this is to impose fees or taxes for using the resources. So examples would include having a permit system for grazing or forcing logging companies to pay a permit to come and log an area. And that idea is that the more that people have to pay per unit of a resource they use, the more likely they are to consider using less and to use it more sustainably. And then the last option is more of a punitive option. This is the idea of imposing taxes, fines, or even criminal charges for groups or individuals that are polluting shared resources, especially air, soil, and water. So let's look at some examples. We have the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, and the Safe Drinking Water Act. And these are all acts that give the EPA the power to impose fines, penalties on companies or individuals that are polluting these shared resources. In terms of grazing, we have something called the Bureau of Land Management, and they oversee tons of public rangelands in the Western United States. They collect grazing fees from ranchers, and they also conduct studies on the quality of the land and help restore it so that it doesn't fall victim to the tragedy of the commons. Our suggested science practice for topic 5.1 today is explaining environmental concepts or processes So I want you to try to answer this practice FRQ. It says the oceans of the world are often referred to as a commons. So identify one other commons, explain how human activity affects that commons, and then propose a solution for managing that commons. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in today. Don't forget to like this video if it was helpful.
All right, so I will put that FRQ in your folder by tomorrow. So again, and I'm not going to do that with you all, but has anybody seen the Lorax, and then just knowing now what Tragedy of the Commons is, and you think you can come off mute and tell us what you think? How does the Lorax relate to? You remember Lorax? Anybody? And how does it relate to Tragedy of the Commons? Who was the Lorax fighting against through the whole movie? And what was that person doing that was infringing upon everybody else's right to resources? Might just ask that as a bonus question later on. But in any case, that is a simplified version to get you to understand how not only the selfish environmental issue of capitalism, but also the effects of all of the organisms and all of the. At the end of the video, he had taken up all the truffle trees and there was nothing left, but there was also no living thing left either. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. All right, so read this over. You do need to remember this name, Garrett Hardin, because he is the one who basically is known for publishing the scenario of Tragedy of the Commons. And then go through these examples that they have. So he mentioned these. Let me go back again. Watering a garden, and you're watering the garden thinking it's just your garden, but all the water is running down the street or into your neighbor's yard. Also, you might have sprayed some yes, thank you, Kia. Yeah, he discovered a tree that he called the truffula tree. And the Onceler, that's his name, the Onceler decided he was going to go into business, making stuff, all the things that he could make from this truffula tree. And he cut them all down, created a factory, and the factory caused pollution, and it polluted the lakes, and it polluted the air. And then the fish left town, the birds left town, the people in the community left town. And then once he cut it all down and had nothing else, the people who lost their jobs because there was nothing else to do there. So, but the Lorax throughout the whole movie, he kept telling, I speak for the trees, leave my trees alone. But my daughter likes that expression, I speak for the trees. But anyway, these are all the things that that we do. So we overwater things. We cut down all the trees. We overfish. And this vacation that I went on, they had a long pier and they let you go out and go fish. But they also asked you that if you're just fishing for the sport of fishing and you're not going to get them for eating, throw the fish back, so that the fish have a chance to reproduce and produce more fish. But if we just keep fishing, taking all the fish out of the ocean and we leave none to reproduce, then we have depleted that as a resource. Overgrazing, what farmers like to do is rotate the crops, rotate the grazing area, so that once they eat the grass in this area, it gives the grass a chance to grow back, because otherwise it becomes dry and then it won't grow back. So that area just becomes arid and unproductive. All right. traffic and pollution. We all know what that does. A personal pool needing maintenance. Think think of on that one. That's more personal. And this is the ocean. You go out boating and fishing and you just dump your garbage in the ocean. And because of the kinds of chemicals that we put into the water and global warming is changing the temperature of the ocean and is causing coral bleaching. This is just unsightly to the neighborhood. That is poisonous to all of the aquatic life in the area where the oil spill is. We did that already. Why is it go? Oh, it's going backwards. All right, so look over that. And then the AP classroom is open for you. And I probably have to open it again for me. Oops. I clicked on it. Why didn't I click? All right, I'm gonna have to start over. But anyway, go to the AP classroom and look at 5. And I'm gonna stop sharing because it's about to show Go Guardian. And work on that. Like I said, I'm going to put that question up from the video, the FRQ. And I also will go ahead and check on, so you have the videos are available to you, and you have 3 questions, MCQ questions to work on in the AP classroom. And I will work at copying and putting that FRQ in your folder. I'll do attendance first. I can find it. And then I will do that. I wonder if all these folks are getting their laptops checked. Quite a few people absent today. Right, when you log into the AP classroom, do check on updates and messages that they have listed. And I do apologize. I just realized I was logged in like it was Wednesday. So I do apologize for that. All right, Brooklyn and Kayla, did you finish your unit 4? I don't, is- please check on that. Unit 4 progress check. It's not giving me anything to score. All right. And Anika and Natalie, I have to score yours, so I got that. But everybody else should have a score. I may not have put it in the book yet, but I'm doing that now. All right, again, Brooklyn and Kayla, please make sure that you've completed your 4 point, the 4.9 is the progress check uh, exam, because trying to record those scores and it doesn't look like you did the FRQ question. So your score is incomplete. I'll wrote these down. Let me check. Natalie, I don't have a FRQ response for you for the, I have the other two questions, but not the FRQ. All right, Kayla, I'm checking yours now. It just says in progress, so I'm not able to see. Until you submit, I cannot see how much you've done. Natalie, you submitted, but when I look at it, there's no, question 3 is the FRQ question and it's not there. So I can't submit a score for you. .9, the El Nino La Nina quiz. Actually, am I looking at the right thing? I think I am. All right, cool. All right, I am supposed to be looking at the progress check. And yeah. Okay, hold on. Yeah, I was viewing 4.9 and trying to, sometimes getting these reports is a good trick. Trying to see everybody view results. No, I closed. Okay. Let me get back in. Or were we supposed to do that when we came? I remember now. It wouldn't let us in at first. But then everybody stayed except Piper. I remember that. Hmm. That was that quiz. That was that what I was looking at just now that was missing for Kayla and Brooklyn is 4.9 quiz. But now the progress check, that's another thing altogether. What am I not seeing? All right, well, yes, definitely for 4.9. So Natalie, I can't score your 4.9 because you're missing that question. And for Brooklyn and Kayla, 4.9. It says that you're in progress, but it's not even giving me something to score. Oh, never mind, Natalie. I found it. I actually had to click on. Okay, Natalie, you're good on that one. I found the answers. Sometimes this website is so confusing. Now I'm confused. Okay, never mind. Kayla, on the progress check, I do have that yours is scored. Now I have to look at the other one. It's like they hide them. Okay. All right, I got to score. Everybody's on that one. All right, so Brooklyn, Amelia, you did not do the FRQ because there's nothing for me to score. All right, I found them. So so for the progress check FRQ, I have to score everybody's, except I don't have a score for Brooklyn and Amelia. And Jesse's not here. Arshis. So those, but everybody else has something for me to grade. Okay. I got it. All right, so I'm finished with 4.9. Now I have to do this and then I can record that. So let me check what I got in the grade book. Okay, got it. So many. Okay. All right, so I got it figured out now. So the progress check, the first part, the MCQ part of it, it was out of 27 points. And then you have a FRQ question that I have to add to that. And then I will post that score. So you can look at your summary page and see the MCQ part of it, but you can't see the FRQ part because I haven't graded it yet. That's what it is. All right. So as far as I can see, the only person, so Amelia, you haven't done the progress check, and Brooklyn haven't done the progress check of those people who are here today. So please make sure that you've done those. Everybody else has a score. All right, now that I'm unconfused, if you have any questions for me, stay. If not, you're welcome to sign out. And I'll see you tomorrow. Okay.